It is February 8th, 2022, and listen, does anybody out there work for Discovery Plus? I just really need to know when new episodes of Beat Bobby Flay are finally going to get added to that app. I follow Bobby on Instagram, and I know there's like 20 or more new episodes missing, and I just need them. I need more Bobby in my life. I think he has really resonated with me in the pandemic just because he is so stable and consistent as a TV presence, and I mean that mostly in a very literal way. The guy is a master of even, consistent tone of voice. And that's hard to do. Like, one reason that judges on Chopped seem so capricious and insane is because how hard it is to maintain a consistent tone across a TV show that shoots for hours and hours and gets edited down to 40 minutes. I just want to give a basic example of this with a clip. This is from Season 8, Episode 4 of Beat Bobby Flay, and Bobby is walking up to the two chefs who are about to compete for a chance to cook against him.
You know what the goal is? You gotta take me down. But first, you must go through each other. You have 20 minutes to make a single ingredient the star of your dish. And that ingredient is artichoke hearts.
Okay, so as he first makes mention of that secret ingredient, we cut to the chefs, faces full of anticipation of the reveal, and then we cut back to Bobby, who magically pulls a plate of artichoke hearts from behind his back. If you are watching this and not paying much attention, as is, intended, you might just assume that he's been holding that plate behind his back the whole time, but he wasn't. Meaning, there's a cut in there, hidden by that shot of the chefs looking at Bobby while a PA brought in the plate. I don't know if they cover it up with a napkin or something, or they just pretend it's a surprise, but anyway, the beginning and ending of Bobby's sentences were filmed at different times, probably several minutes apart. But you can't tell, and a big reason you can't tell is because of the consistency of his voice and delivery. It is a really valuable tool, especially in the editing-happy world of food TV. Like, just listen to this other clip. There's like 10 different cuts in this line.
Cindy, Stacy, welcome. Curtis and Ann, we're here for one thing, and that's to get one of you guys to beat me, of course. First, you must go through each other.
Not even Bobby Flay could keep that from sounding weird, but it's the exception that proves the rule. A lot of the voices in the last episode were people I'd never actually spoken to before and yet have known for literally over a decade, because we all originally met on this now defunct blog called Video Gum. There was this series of posts there that was called The Hunt for the Worst Movie of All Time, and I discovered it one day when I was working these call center shifts at BU, and whatever post I read first was so funny that I just read every single entry in that series. I remember, actually, at first, at that job, we were allowed to use personal laptops during those shifts. And then they changed the rules and said we could read and do homework, but couldn't use computers, which is how you know this was 2009 and not like even a year later than that, when the idea of doing any sort of college coursework without an electronic device would be laughable. But yeah, in those transitional days of 2009, I would print out articles from blogs. Like, I'd copy and paste them into Word and put them in 8-point font, 3 columns per page, and just sort of like splice in some readings for class. Not to disguise it, I mean, nobody was checking, but just as a way to accomplish a little bit of real work inside a mountain of fun bullshit. Pretty much the same way that I operate now, but less analog. Anyway, after I came upon that movie column, I became just a regular reader, and Twitter was also getting started at the time, and so everybody who read that site, which had a very active comment section, all sort of joined Twitter at the same time, like I think all in the same week. It felt like there were only 400 people on the internet back then. The guy who wrote Video Gum for most of its run was named Gabe Delahaye, and he eventually started doing these videos for GQ with the comedian Max Silvestri. It was called Gabe and Max's 100 Seconds. It was very influential on me, for sure. We were doing Angry Films On at the time, and I think just looking around at the internet, it was an influence for a lot of other people too. Recently, I was retracing the steps that led to me becoming the kind of person who deeply appreciates the way an episode of Beat Bobby Flay is edited, and I actually traced it back to that same community that sprung up around and then survived beyond Video Gum. See, there's this show from 2016 called Recipe for Deception that aired on Bravo for just 10 episodes, and yet, as it turns out, it very deeply influenced my viewing habits for the last 6 years.
Yeah, you did hook me with that. I have not met anyone who's had even 1 year of their media consumption altered by that show. So I'm intrigued. I'm hopefully flattered. I mean, hopefully it didn't take you down like a deep paranoid conspiracy wormhole, or I hope it didn't cause you to lose your family or anything.
No. I mean, I guess technically the opposite, because all right, well, I'll go back, right? So yeah, that's Max Silvestri from Gabe and Max's 100 Seconds, but also from Broad City and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Good Place. But before those huge, well-known shows in the old blog days of yore, he was an up-and-coming comedian that I followed on Twitter. And I listened to your stand-up record like not long after that, because I have this very distinct memory of there's a joke on your stand-up record about like, I think it's a Jurassic Park 2 t-shirt that like crumbles up. So my wife and I were listening to that stand-up album while like painting in our apartment, and both of us had to like stop and like put down paintbrushes and like scream laugh at that joke.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Oh, I haven't thought about that joke in a while, and that's very nice, Zachary. Thank you.
I think I only heard that joke. It's been years since I heard that joke, but I remember it still all the time.
I never did it on TV or, like never taped it. It was only on that album from now, a decade ago or whatever. So, and it's a very filthy joke that we won't repeat for the gentle ears of your podcast listener.
And it's worth it for the buildup, it's worth it to hear that punchline. It occurs to me now that saying worth it for the buildup is itself a spectacularly dirty reference to that joke, but I don't think it was intentional. Anyway, fast forward to 2016. Christy and I are moving into our house. I'm starting this podcast. Liar's Bench Beer is opening up in Portsmouth. It's a real transformational time. We don't have internet at our house yet, but at our old apartment, I download some stuff to watch while we fix up the new place, including the first episode of a new cooking show called Recipe for Deception. At this point, I'd never watched a single cooking show in my life. The only reason I downloaded it was because Max was the host.
With only a few clues to go on, the chefs must figure out their secret ingredient while there's still enough time to feature it in an amazing dish.
And there were only like 10 episodes of that show. So after that was over, we were like, I like this thing with like cooking competition shows, right? And I mean, for the last 7 years or so now, that's like almost all I've that's like almost all I ever watched. I've watched like thousands of episodes of Chopped and Beat Bobby Flay, and I've just now gotten into Top Chef, which there's...
Oh my God. This is so funny to hear that Recipe for Deception is your way in, because I'm trying to think of it was such a, if I presume if you're listening and you haven't seen it, it was like a very complicated twist on the Chopped formula, where there was like each chef had a secret ingredient that they didn't know what it was, but their opponent did. And there was lying and 2 truths and a lie to like try to figure it out, and so many rules and whatever. I feel like getting into cooking shows by watching Recipe for Deception is like getting into like war movies by watching, what is that? Hot Shots Part 2, the Charlie Sheen parody, of just being like, yeah, okay, it's pretty crazy, but I'm liking the planes and that they're like fighting for freedom, and then learning about Top Gun after and being like, oh, okay, this is actually a better version of this done first.
It's actually kind of consistent for me, because like I grew up watching The Simpsons and not knowing what they were parodying.
Totally, yes. If you grew up on like The Simpsons and like Animaniacs and stuff like that, you like kind of found your way into weird 70s and 80s boomer references that we all had to like pretend to know about, and being like, oh yes, of course, Nixon, his lawyer Halderman, I definitely know what that is. You like learn about it eventually in like some better movie or something like that. I actually like so much of the pop music canon when I was younger, I knew through Weird Al versions. And Weird Al would always have those the like polka medleys on the album that they didn't even change the lyrics. He just kind of like played the hooks fast, in polka, and I was like learning about music that way. And then I would hear it slowed down with guitars out in the world. I'd be like, oh yeah, this is much better than the accordion version.
Sometimes I feel like the first version imprints on you though. And then like the non-parody version of the song just doesn't quite sound right.
I totally know what you mean. I hope that's the case about Recipe for Deception, where you're just watching all these truly tried and true successful formulas and being like, it just doesn't sing the way that 10 episode unsuccessful show did.
Well, you know what the thing about it is? So I've done like video editing for a long time. And I think one thing that really attracts me to cooking shows is thinking about the way they're put together is like doing a crossword puzzle for me or something. I think about how much they would have had to shoot in order to reduce it down to what they have and how it's edited. And there's good edits and bad edits. You're like, oh, okay, Food Network had their crack team on this episode, and
right.
Sometimes you see when they're letting themselves break the rules a little bit and you get excited about that.
But you do part of what makes it like satisfying, like nightlight TV, the sort of like comfort viewing that you kind of like know what you're getting. And like when I'm home, like visiting my mom or in a hotel that has cable and I don't have like DVR or the internet, Food Network is the first thing I put on. And like those rhythms of whether they be Chopped or even like the diners, drive-ins and dives, like where you kind of, the structure is always the same, and whether they find it before or after, the like little storytelling of like, this is what this guy's competing for. And this is the like hubristic mistake he's making and cooking. And he's not like, they're so good at that. And I think until I did the show and watched how it came together in the edit, and I'd even done a couple food shows, but this is the first one that I was like, being the only host so involved with, that I didn't realize how important the storytelling was. I kind of was just like, I don't know, you're cooking, make it go fast, and then, show the winner who got voted off. But like these beats of like the up down for each competitor, and this is like done in editing or with the voiceover of like, oh shoot, he's maybe going to overcook the shrimp. If he doesn't go to that pan and get it off soon, we're going to be dealing with some rubbery shrimp. And then like, like setting up the stakes and all these like little micro story beats almost that they kind of make whole cloth in editing. I was not aware of them until I kind of was like, for Recipe for Deception, a lot was put together in the editing and voiceover. Like they had me come in and truly like narrate fake, like pretending as if I was whispering off camera, but just like 1 million like, okay, so he thinks it's scallop, but the thing is he's misunderstood that, like all like to kind of tell this really complicated story after. And I was like, I don't think the show's going to be good if I have to be whispering, like for 20 minutes of it.
It can either help you in the long run. What good's a song if the song's no fun, son? Shogun, invisible armor, level 5. Couldn't penetrate the bomber with your llama, stay alive. Play job, beaming on the telemetry. Old enough to be your uncle, prime time MC. Although prefer the term rama. Third time a slurred word primer. Diamond mama.
It's February 9th, and we've been watching Top Chef for a couple of weeks now, which, in my previously established reverse-oriented way, sort of feels like the inevitable destination of our years-long food show addiction, which has included, ungodly amounts of Chopped, every available episode of Beat Bobby Flay, Broken Bread, Chef Show, Mind of a Chef, I'll Have What Phil's Having, Somebody Feed Phil, Food Network Star, every iteration of David Chang's TV programming, including the particularly exceptional The Next Thing You Eat, which just dropped this year, and which you should definitely seek out if you enjoy like the way that this podcast tends to wander around topics. Anyway, I was talking about Top Chef. Right. Top Chef is clearly the platonic ideal of a cooking show, one that every other show I've watched has been stealing from for years, and I just didn't know because I started on the Outer Banks and rode my way ashore. I mean, I see now that there are elements of the show Food Network Star that just sort of assume you already know the rules they're ripping off from Top Chef. I'm happy to have found it. Happy to be where I truly belong, watching Top Chef literally every night, safe in the embrace of the cold, alien beauty of Padma Lakshmi. Of course, since I can't do anything the right way, we started in the middle of Top Chef with Season 9, because I like to start these shows in a place where they clearly have their sea legs already, and also because Ed Lee competed that year, and we really love Ed Lee from Mind of a Chef and his 2 books. In Season 9, there's this other guy, though. His name is Paul Key. Paul Key, Ed Lee, I don't know if that's why they were chosen, because of their names. Anyway, Paul Key goes on just an incredible winning streak across the season. Top Chef is prominently sponsored by Healthy Choice, among some other admirably transparent product placement, and sort of seemingly at random, Healthy Choice will incentivize a challenge with a $10,000 or $20,000 prize. Paul Key just absolutely cleans up, and at the end of the season, kind of a spoiler alert, he ends up with something like 180 grand, a new car, and a trip to Costa Rica. Now, this all happened about 10 years ago, so when I looked up Paul on social media, I was unsurprised to see that the guy runs like 10 restaurants now. I mean, he got a life-changing rocket boost to his career, and a huge amount of money, and he clearly made the most of it. And it's sort of funny to realize that this thing that changed Paul Key's life forever was ultimately pretty inexpensive advertising for Healthy Choice. Like, less than 1/30th of the cost of a Super Bowl ad this year. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder why other big companies are not constantly putting chunks of their million-dollar advertising budgets toward just making a huge, big change in someone's life. I mean, I'm sure that some of them do, but Amazon could fund a new Paul Key every single day. I started asking around for people who'd come into large chunks of money. I just wanted to know what they did with it. Past guest on this show, Raynell Cooper, I already knew, won like 70 G's on Jeopardy and spent it on his college education, like a responsible nerd. I was curious about the mechanics of how he actually got the money, though, and I asked him to explain.
I won the Jeopardy teen tournament in 2011. I was 16 years old at the time, and
Raynell left me a voicemail, but it got kind of garbled, so Suzanne, the AI voice robot's going to step in here.
I won the Jeopardy teen tournament in 2011. I was 16 years old at the time, and the winning total prize was $75,000. And you would think that they wouldn't just send a 16-year-old a check for $75,000 in the mail. But that's exactly what they did. I expected it to be tied up in some sort of scholarship thing, or maybe sent to my parents, but nope, an intelligent my name on it. There was about $6,000 I think taken off beforehand, withheld. So the check itself was more like $69,000. And then, just have to go with my parents to the H&R Block and explain the situation, an intelligible California tax code, and Maryland taxes and all that. So probably ended up about having to pay about $15,000 more in taxes after that.
Other people had different responses. Amber B told me that after a 6-figure book deal, she took some trips, bought a car, replaced the windows in her house. Mitch P told me that his grandparents gave him an unexpected sum of money that mostly just made him feel guilty. Bob Karen, Jory's uncle, longtime friend of the show, he increased his charitable giving after selling an inherited property at what was technically a loss, but still resulted in a lot of extra cash in hand at once. Other people had more complicated answers.
It doesn't take much money to completely, radically change your life.
This is Tom.
When the COVID stimulus money came in for me, it was at a time where I was just at the tipping point with credit card debt. I had slipped across into a zone that I didn't think I was going to come back from, at least not in a way that would really let me live the way I kind of wanted to live. I thought I'm going to be stuck with this debt in this town I don't want to be living in a job where I'm not all that happy. And when I got that money and was able to pay down that debt, at least in that small amount, it was kind of a turning point, both financially and in what I believed could be possible for me. It really seemed like for once a new, better future was possible for me. What's so heartbreaking about it is to now see how little it takes to really radically change someone's life for the better, both financially and in how they see themselves and what they believe their future could hold, and yet to know how unwilling we are to do that.
I had loved Top Chef specifically for a long time before I kind of got into food shows. I was like a young stand-up and writer in New York, and I think a season or two after Top Chef premiered, a friend of mine who edited a restaurant blog called Eater had put up these recaps of Top Chef that were truly like facts based, of just like, this is what happened last night and this is the fish dish and who was eliminated. And recaps weren't quite a thing yet. They were starting to be kind of a internet blog genre, but this was sort of pre-social media, and like they existed some places. But I was like, I'll write a funnier version of this, and ended up writing it for years and years. So like followed Top Chef really closely and kind of got to like know Top Chef people through it. And I knew they read my recaps, but I was like very much an outside observer. You know, I wasn't so much mocking or celebrating the show as just really engaging with, you know, the villains, the heroes, the dummies, the competition. You know, like I liked the show. And you know, I had gotten asked to be kind of like a comic on a new food show. Like it was kind of a talk show that came and went called The Feed, and then had hosted another complicated game show that was sort of like Amazing Race meets Chopped. And then, you know, did this show, and like...
Okay, I just want to make clear that we're back to talking about Recipe for Deception here. I know we've wandered around a bit.
I felt I was being hired to be funny and upbeat, you know, like I in my mind, I was like, I'm a comic and comedy writer. My food bona fides are not that impressive, you know, like I've written about Top Chef and written, I don't know, like a couple funny essays for like Food and Wine, but I'm not, you know, I don't claim to be like a foodie. I wasn't trying to put myself out as an expert or whatever. So I was like, I'm here to be funny. But I think what I realized as I was doing it is that also what I was there to do was to like keep, as any host is, to keep things moving, to be hopefully charming and lighthearted in how you like deliver a lot of rules. Like it was, you know, the show specifically was like so much like, okay, you're 1 minute away from your 5-minute truth reveal where you get one more chance to learn a third clue about, you know, like there was so much of that in the structure, yeah. Like 15 of these rule timer beats and time calls and stuff. But, you know, I was like writing funny bits and like had my little like patter I was writing. And I, you know, in the filming of the show, because we're filming all day to get one episode, I felt like it was a comedy packed show, you know, like I knew how much I was making the crew laugh and even the contestants, and knew all the like funny lines and little joke interviews and all these things that, you know, walking away after 8 hours of shooting was like, there's a lot of, you know, we're hopefully making a comedic Chopped or whatever, you know, that this is for fans of food shows, but that people who also want to laugh. And it wasn't until watching it, and it was kind of marketed that way of like, this is irreverent and, you know, like this is tricky, but my weird bits were the first to be edited away. You know, when the most important thing is to tell the story of whether the lobster is going to be cooked or not, there's not really room for like absurdist host patter from like a comic that is overwriting bits. So it wasn't until after that I put together, like how I saw this was like not what they needed. Mm-hmm. Bravo at the time, I'd been told, had this kind of like audience divide problem where they had Top Chef, which was like not the highest rated show, but like because kind of like upscale people watch Top Chef, the advertising rates were like really high, and they always had like Lexus product tie-ins, and it was like this kind of like prestige program. But then the rest of their viewers were watching kind of like more fun reality housewives type programming, but they weirdly like none of the housewives people watched Top Chef, and none of the Top Chef people watched Housewives. And I think they wanted like they wanted to cross-pollinate a bit more, and they had tried a few times to launch programming after Top Chef that was like Top Chef desserts or Top Chef, like something that was like building out this brand, but really it was like people were there for Top Chef and they didn't want anything, like, bye, Bravo.
Yeah.
So the hope was that this show would both be appealing as like a easy, cheesy, funny watch for Housewives fans, but also keep Top Chef fans tuned in. And it was that very old story of, not enough for either. So nobody was happy because, I don't think Top Chef fans were into this like cheese ball, like cheesier show with like where the food wasn't as good and the resumes weren't as fancy. And Housewives people were like, I still don't want to watch Top Chef stuff. I don't care. I'm here to see people like, throw wine.
Yeah, throw wine at each other. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. Like, I feel like I have no idea how I would feel coming into it in a different way, right? Because that show, Recipe for Deception, was like it was like baby's first food show, and probably the tone of it and everything was really helpful for me. Like, I actually was the person who walked across that bridge that they were trying to lay.
Yeah, you were the ideal. If only you'd written a letter 10,000 times, my career might have gone differently. Can I ask what your relationship to food or cooking was beforehand? Because that's the other interesting thing about some food programming, where I feel like a lot of Top Chef people are fans are people that like love restaurants or they love cooking, or, they get into it after getting into the show. And I just like wonder, what your relationship to like food was before.
I thought I liked food and like restaurants and stuff, but looking back at it, especially now with like a pandemic where like I haven't been able to like go out to eat, like I think my relationship with it is totally different now because of watching cooking shows. And I think I kind of always thought I was like an adventurous like eater and also like interested in like cooking and everything, but I didn't think about it nearly as much as I think about it now. A really basic example is the idea of balance in a dish, like balancing the fat with the acidity, the spicy with the sweet. I never thought about this when I used to cook before cooking shows. And honestly, even for the first few years of watching them, I didn't really understand what they meant when they would talk about it. It was Bobby Flay and the way that he explains balance that finally unlocked the idea for me. And one reason that I really like Beat Bobby Flay as a show is there's only a few dishes that have to get cooked. And the person who competes against Bobby is making a dish that they make really well. Like, there's no obstacle or gimmick for them to overcome. The obstacle's for Bobby, who also has to make their dish even if he has no idea what it is. So there is more of an emphasis on technique and process than they would have time for on shows like Chopped. I also told Max that getting really into food TV made me wish I had done it back when I was living in Philly and Boston, just because I think I would have sought out more and different and better restaurants. I've eaten better in both cities just visiting them again in recent years than I did the whole time I lived there. When I was talking about this with Christy last night, she pointed out that in our days in Philly and Boston, we would get these huge takeout orders. Like, we would order 2 pizzas and a cheesesteak to split, or we'd order like Chinese food and Mexican. And what we were doing, without even realizing it, was chasing balanced flavor. We would seek the salt from the cheesesteak and get the sweet from the Hawaiian pizza. The place next door to us in East Boston made Hawaiian pizza with coconut on it. It was amazing. And what probably would have satisfied us, and also kept me from gaining as much weight as I did in the city, was just a single and more creative and nuanced dish. Of course, it probably would have cost the same amount. It's February 4th, and I have chosen this month to try to reset a lot of my habitual behaviors. Primarily having a beer virtually every night, and snacking every day, and eating desserts every night. These are hard habits to kick, honestly, and it's less of an addiction to the substances themselves, booze and sugar and salt, and more of an addiction to the routine. For 2 years now, I have been organizing my life by the common landmarks. Wake up, have coffee, log into work, answer emails, solid block of Zoom meetings in the mid-morning, delving into harder work tasks in the afternoon, usually rolling a few minutes over quitting time because I get so absorbed. After work, watch Mr. Rogers with my boys, have a beer, play with them while Christy preps dinner, dancing and playing after dinner, bath time, kids in bed, time to connect with Christy finally, then Top Chef and cookies, 5 to 6 hours of sleep, repeat 500 times. Some people thrive on routine, but I don't. In a pandemic with small children, it often feels like I don't have a choice. And there are some days when I'm grateful for a forced interruption to that routine, and there are other days when I crave a return to it. A few days ago, we ran out of oil and had to make an emergency call to our HVAC guy on a Sunday night. The temperature in our house was dropping like 10 degrees an hour. That was the kind of day when I was desperate to get back to the usual cycle. But overall, I can feel it weighing me down, pushing my shoulders together, buckling my knees. And so I'm trying to change what little I can. And it's hard. It's so embarrassing that it's hard, but it's hard. Like, Christy bought the boys this cinnamon babka the other day, and the fact that I haven't eaten half of it is a real personal triumph for me. Did I eat a tiny little half slice of it? Of course. I mean, I'm not made of steel.
I mean, the other thing about that moment that I still don't think they've quite figured out, or the moment that, you know, these couple shows I was working on was like, felt right as, I don't know, food appreciation, or whatever you want to call it, foodie culture, which is a gross phrase, but like that was like, you know, no longer maybe just this like niche kind of thing, but was becoming like more casual. People like kind of knew about like what a sous vide is, or even if they didn't do it themselves, they watched enough TV where they're like, oh yeah, you don't have to explain to me every little thing of like, you know, what this ingredient is or what, like, because people have been watching Chopped or whatever. So it was the hope is like, well, we can now be funny about it because we don't have to explain everything. And
Right.
We assume people are coming with like a base of knowledge. And, you know, maybe that's become truer in the meantime, or maybe if it was like a different type of show, but I think they definitely found the pressure to, or they were forced to. In TV, you got to explain everything. You know, anytime you assume that like you don't have to spell out exactly what's going on every 90 seconds in TV. Yeah, you're wrong. You kind of have to.
Well, I do think one of the weirdest things about watching like a season of Top Chef from 10 years ago or something is that it's really hard to try to think back about like where various forms of like cultural literacy were. You know, like there's certain like interactions where the way that like a male chef interacts with a female chef, or like people of different races interact and that kind of thing, that you're like, did that hit people the way it hits me now 10 years ago? Or, you know, was that, and like a less controversial one is even just like the approach to Asian food, you know? Like,
yep. Yeah.
I have Japanese family. And so like our understanding and approach to that food is so different than other people. So I was not really aware of it like becoming trendy or accepted or understood. But I can tell that it did, because when I go back and watch stuff, like people react to ingredients like kimchi or something in a cooking show from 2008 is so radically different than the way they react in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think food in an interesting way is like, and the way we talk about food has been at like the forefront of like these conversations about like identity and authenticity, and like who gets to tell whose stories, and like what is appropriation and what is whitewashing, and all these things that like we see across, you know, all sorts of media. Like food and like what you put on the table is like the oldest form of all of that. And like, it is interesting to watch, you know, I don't know that I would say Top Chef, like they've had some stumbles, but they've also like put themselves at the knife's edge of that conversation, where it's like, you know, we're never going to present an ingredient as like, you know, this is a stinky, gross thing from this weird market that we're like, ugh, like in a way that like any number of shows from back then might have done, or like James Corden might still be doing today. You know, like Top Chef tries to, you know, see and celebrate like, you know, that is like someone's culture, and that us coming in is like, you know, Western white people or whatever and saying like, well, that's gross to me, is like something they would never rightly do now. And I also think like they don't, in a cool and interesting way, I feel like they used to always be kind of pushing, all these food shows kind of wanted like a certain type of like, I don't know, like fancy continental cuisine, you know, even if it brought in like quote Asian flavors, it was like ultimately is this like up to like a French restaurant standards or whatever. But now they like celebrate and reward chefs that are like, no, I want to keep cooking like my, like, you know, my culture's cuisine,
Right.
and I'm going to keep finding ways to fit that into the challenge, but I'm going to do this, you know, pure and singular thing, and not try to just be like, who's the best at making whatever French butter sauces or whatever, which is like the old thing.
We're like laying out somebody's like a great thesis for somebody who's doing like
Yes.
like doing a cultural studies master's degree or something, you know, like
For sure.
tracing something across years of like a food show. And it's easier than ever now with like Discovery Plus and all that jazz.
I know. And I think like over the pandemic, not just food stuff, but I've like had so many friends that have like watched all of Survivor from the beginning or all of Top Chef, and like, you know, watching 15 years of anything that is trying to be like mass culture, you know, you're going to watch like what's okay to joke about and like what power dynamics are like interesting and then what become uncomfortable. And, you know, like it's a great survey.
You know, people who do like the elimination diet, shit like that. I don't have the discipline, but I get the appeal. Because it's so hard to figure out what exactly is causing you misery. But taking your diet down to the bare essentials and then methodically adding back in until you can pin down that, like, I don't know, brassicas give you indigestion or whatever, it must be amazing. The relief of a diagnosis. Lately I've been feeling happier, and it could be a lot of things. Could be not drinking, not eating so much sugar. Could be that I have a creative project that's engaging me. I hate how tightly that kind of thing is tied to my happiness, but it is. Could be that we've been doing yoga as a family a lot. Well, Isaac just kind of wanders around, but the rest of us do it. It could just be distance from a difficult holiday season. Could be all of it. It could just be that I listened to a good song like 2 hours ago and I'll be sad again in another hour. No way of knowing.
It's the beat. I hear it in my sleep sometimes. Blare it in your Jeep so your peeps can stare at the rhymes. Real rhymes, not your everyday hologram. Even when ribs is touching, never swallow the ham. He'd rather eat a sand sandwich salad. It might need salt like your man's bland ballad. A lot of stuff happens that the news won't tell yous. Blues on L juice, snooze all hell loose. Break it, take it like the good, the bad, the ugly. Break it rolling through your hood in the caddy buggy. Butter softy leather, floss and fatty juggy. Always threw me off when she told me daddy funked me.
My shit is love, simply meaning that my joint is tight. Amping up the mic, making sure production's tight. Sometimes I might catch a severe case of writer's block, but by the end of the day, you'll be on my jock. Real name's Malik, my hobby's putting MC to the test. And if you front, I put my foot up in your freaking chest.
She wanna hear the beatbox, take pills and make fake krills to sheetrock. Sing it.
Okay, so that is today's episode. Thank you to Max Silvestri. Full disclosure, there's a little more of that interview left over for next time as some narrative connective tissue. You know how it goes. I also want to thank Raynell and Tom. It is February 15th right now as I record this. Happy birthday, Connor Oberst. And that means that I am more than halfway through my month of swearing off beer and sugar and just generally trying to get a grip on at least a few of my out-of-control habits. It isn't as hard now. I've been keeping up with the yoga pretty well, and I feel very aware of my body, both in good and bad ways, mostly good ways. I'm drinking more water. It sucks, I hate water, but I acknowledge that it makes me feel better to do so. Sometimes I add some apple cider vinegar to it, and it's like, great work, Zach, you found a way to make water even worse. Meanwhile, as of Sunday night, I've now watched 3 seasons of Top Chef in a row, and it strikes me that doing that is also now a habit, so I stopped for a while. We've been reading books at night instead, and talking about the home improvement projects that we can start on once we get our tax return. Not as fun as Top Chef, but not bad either. All right. See you next time.